So President Trump is trying something new to unlock the stalled housing market. Posting an image on Truth Social showing great American presidents, Franklin Roosevelt next to the 30-year mortgage and himself next to a 50-year mortgage. All right, so Caroline, I think a lot of this is aimed at younger people who cannot get in a home. They feel like mortgage rates are too high, housing prices are too high, therefore they can't afford the monthly payment. They need help. 50-year mortgage. Technically, I think it would bring down your monthly payment, but is it appealing to that younger voter, that younger person who wants to get into a home?
Well, first thing I'll say is that a 50-year mortgage will dispense of the idea that eventually you will own your home. Right. And you, for over a decade, you're going to be paying mostly interest on that home. So that's kind of an alarming statistic as well. But the instincts here from...
But are young voters doing the math like that, or are they just saying, I could finally afford to get into a home?
Well, so here's what I'll say about Gen Z. For Trump to do this, his instincts are smart, given Mamdani's win among Gen Z voters in New York City. There is real generational pain among Gen Z. We feel like we've been priced out of the real estate market. You see all these memes on social media that are something to the effect of the baby boomers are celebrating the sale of the $3.2 million property, which they bought in 1969 for 3 raspberries or a bushel of corn or a couple nickels. That's the sense of intergenerational theft that Gen Z feels. But the problem is that this is going to perpetuate this vicious cycle of government intervention, as we were saying before, and it's just continuing to dump trillions of dollars on the subsidized housing market, which is only going to increase demand. It does nothing to address supply. So I think what we should be asking for Gen Z's sake is, how are we fixing the supply crisis, which is probably regulations for home builders?
Dagan.
The price just simply has to come down. Mm-hmm. And that is not going to happen just through additional new supply of new construction. It will be people being forced to sell, and it will be people cutting the price on their homes. And I don't want to wish a crisis on the housing market in this country, but ultimately prices have to ease and have to fall. Because even, I said this, even adjusting for inflation, your price to rent and your price to incomes, the valuations today in housing are higher than at the peak of the 2007 bubble. And people do think about a 50-year mortgage, I'm not going to build up any equity, that I'm just making, it just makes the monthly nut a little more affordable, but that you're going to wind up being underwater, that you cannot make an overpriced home more a great investment by creating easier loan terms. And I just thought about what happened with car loans. So car loan before 2015 was a typical new car loan, 5 years. Then 2017, 2019, oh, we need to get you in that car, little lady. We're going to give you a 6-year term to bring that monthly payment down. Then 2020, 2022, when, money was just like water and everybody was buying cars, new cars, used cars, 7-year loan. Well, and then they peaked, and then they've come back down to earth a little bit. But the very fact that this is an idea is probably peak housing bubble.
Okay, so my next question to you, Jackie, was, would it be terrible if this was an option on the table? Even if financially we don't love it for many reasons, would it be bad if it's out there just for somebody? Maybe there's somebody who says, look, I'll get into a 50-year mortgage, my career will take off, I'm going to refinance the thing. This is just a way to help me get in, even if it's not a 50-year mortgage that I'm going to have forever.
I agree with what everybody has said about the financial aspect of it. I don't love it. But if it is out there and it's offered as a product, people will definitely use it and take advantage of it, unless the prices drop sooner than that, which, on a time basis, I'm not really sure what would happen. But as somebody who has a 30-year mortgage, I could tell you every year keeps passing and I keep trying to, pay it down. And I'm like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And then I look at the amortization schedule and I'm like, nope. we've got 26 more years to go. It's a really long time. It doesn't make you feel connected to your home. I always talk about home buying from an emotional aspect, which is, safety, comfort, knowing that nobody's going to be able to push you out of your place, emotional security, feeling a sense of accomplishment that it's yours. As you lengthen out that period of time that you're in debt, the less you really feel like that asset is actually yours, emotionally speaking.
The good side, if there is any, it's not required, but Dagan, it helps push the idea of issuing a 50-year treasury. Now, you don't need a 50-year treasury to come up with a 50-year mortgage. You can index it off of a 30-year or go to another country with a 50-year bond. But if it brings us closer to locking in our long-term debt at a lower rate, i.e. a 50-year treasury, I'm not totally opposed to it. My worry, Brian, among everything, is that this is essentially an interest-only loan because people are never in their home, rarely for 30 years, let alone 50. The math on an average home of about $400,000 at a 6.2% rate, it takes 20 years to pay off the first $50,000. On a 30-year mortgage, it's only 8 years. So it really is all the interest.
So, President Trump is throwing out a lot of ideas right now. He was like on Economy Idea Generation weekend,
which is great.
So I think what he's saying is I've got to get focused on the economy. I've got to help people out. He's reaching for ideas that are graspable in the short term. But I think the sense is that it's a bigger, longer term issue, Caroline, that has to be dealt with, okay? And I think part of what the big, beautiful law was part of a longer term push, right? It was lower taxes, less regulation, long-term prosperity. Politics doesn't tolerate long-term plans, right? It demands short-term. Are you concerned that he's going so short-term right now because he needs it politically, or is that what a good leader does to try to generate ideas?
Well, I would actually argue even in the short term, this is not prudent given that the youth turnout is really important. And I don't think Gen Z is going to buy this argument that if you just give baby boomers and older generation more of a chance to have homes that appreciate and we don't, we can see right through that. That's very transparent.
Does Gen Z, are they demanding a housing correction? Does Gen Z just want to see the housing market tank?
Yes, but the problem is that so many members of Gen Z are susceptible to the socialist ideas that are prescribed by Mamdani, which basically just say more government intervention, freeze the rent, which of course would exacerbate the housing crisis. But what we have to somehow figure out is how to restore the market equilibrium, which is the supply. And I hear what Dagan's saying about the supply, but I mean, it has to be fixed.
Serious question, though, for Gen Z. Gen Z gets a lot of help from their parents. It doesn't really have to do with them being able to make ends meet. I understand that is a difficulty. But they get a lot of help from their parents, who are presumably boomers, who presumably own these homes. At some point, their parents will perish and leave them these assets. Sometimes the complaining out of Gen Z is a little much for me.
I think that's half true. If they do, in fact, leave them those assets, that's helpful. I mean, it's something that I think about because I don't think I'll be able to own a home. Genuinely don't believe that's going to be attainable in my lifetime. But the other end of it is, okay, but if the average home ownership age has now been pushed into the 40s, into the 50s, that's really jarring and kind of disorienting for Gen Z as well, because this is supposed to be the peak of the American dream, is the picket fence with the porch and the golden retriever in the yard. And it's like, no, you're going to be a renter's society forever because of the disharmony in the market.
There's a cultural effect of that when a generation starts thinking like that. And you don't have to believe in the picket fence or whatever, but home ownership comes with realities. Like, you start doing a budget, or you realize the error of not doing a budget when you own a home, because you've got taxes and you've got payments and you've got maintenance. When you lose the responsibilities of ownership, it changes you politically. And I think that is where we are with Gen Z right now. We would
Private property.
Interesting.
Private property is the cornerstone of our republic.
And it's where you learn about private property more than any other space, I would argue, in life.